On this cold last Sunday after the Epiphany, and happy Valentine's Day. It's really cold outside, but warm inside. I thought we had a beautiful service, and we're so grateful to Brandon for his words. I have been fortunate to know Brandon through my work with the Episcopal Church at Yale, but I had not heard him preach before. We invited him on Paul's recommendation, and I'm so glad that you were in our pulpit this morning, Brandon. You had words of wisdom for us all. So it's wonderful to be together as we continue this forum series on thinking about how our faith gets lived out in our lives and how we root and ground ourselves in God's love and grace and scriptures. And this morning we're joined by members of the Episcopal Church at Yale. Most of you don't need an introduction to the Reverend Paul Carling. Paul, of course, was an associate rector here at St. Luke's for several years and is now the chaplain in his 7th year at ECY, and is, we are sad to say, retiring from that ministry this spring after an incredible work there. And I know how incredible it is because I'm Paul's boss. Although really, I think Paul's my boss most of the time. But I'm the chair of the board of the Episcopal Church at Yale. And so I have gotten to see firsthand the incredible work Paul has done, building that ministry, strengthening it, and empowering students for leadership in it. I think that's his greatest legacy as the chaplain at Yale, is raising up students. And so we're very glad to have Paul back with us at St. Luke's, and very glad to have 2 of the wonderful students from ECY with us today for a conversation about faith on campus. You've already met Brandon, and maybe he'll have a few more words of introduction, but Brandon is a senior at Yale College. And then Malia Young is on here somewhere. There she is. Excellent. Malia is a sophomore, right?
That's right.
Exactly. So Malia is a sophomore, and though she feels like a senior because she's made such an impact on the ministry of ECY so quickly. So we are blessed to have the 3 of you with us today. And Paul, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I'm going to say just a few words, which I know all of you who know me will think is uncharacteristic. But after that, I'm going to show you a very brief video, which I think is more powerful than words. But I want to say, although it's been a decade since I moved on from St. Luke's after 7 wonderful years, and even though the parish has continued to flourish to the point that I haven't met many of you, it truly feels to me this morning like coming home. My experience then and now under Ryan's leadership is that the beating heart of your community is so large and so open that even across Zoom, I feel an abundant welcome home. And really, to be perfectly honest, it just makes my heart sing. With you, I mourn my dear friends, Peg Weeks and Roger Gilbert. One of my favorite memories of St. Luke's is another adult forum that Roger actually suggested, and that they both attended with Marty and Ken, their spouses. It was Valentine's Day 15 years ago, and my wife and Sharice and I were asked to give a talk titled Easy to Fall and Hard to Live, which was all about the miraculous daily quandary we call marriage. And let's just say a lot of you could relate. That was a fun time. But I'm not here this morning to talk about me, but a ministry that God has used over the last 7 years, indeed over the last 150 years, to transform the lives of young adults and the clergy who serve them. That's why, though I just turned 75, I look 60 and I feel 50. As a Super Bowl ad might proclaim to some of you, walk with God, my friends, and 75 is the new 50. And for my friends Brandon and Malia, 2 undergrads at Episcopal Church at Yale, 20 is the new 50. Not in years, but in wisdom, in relationship with God, and in their passion for leadership in our church. You heard Brandon's sermon this morning, and you would have heard Malia's had she preached, so I don't have to tell you what I mean. The college years and the years of young adulthood that follow them are literally God's seedbed. They're an opportunity for spiritual growth and transformation like no other period in life. And they need our support. Of the 31 colleges and universities in Connecticut, only 2 have Episcopal chaplaincies. And frankly, I think that's a scandal for the church. These years are literally the church's present and the future, if only we as God's people are willing to walk with and support these young people. You know this, as so many of you now work to support your own young adult children as their future is ravaged by the pandemic. And you know how differently they understand their world, the very different meaning they make and seek about God and about the world they feel called to create, the contours and demands of which are very different from the world and the church we have made. A church which we are all called to fashion into that new creation that Jesus dreamed of. So I'm going to show you a brief video now, and then I'm going to turn it over to 2 of my dear friends, Malia and Brandon. So let's just take a minute now to share screen and then to share this video. Are you ready? Here we go.
Through pandemics and chaos, we just continue to try to find ways to be with each other. And we have, the community persists.
ECY is a community oriented towards radical hospitality, towards a radical welcome of students, members of the community of New Haven, clergy members from across the church, alumni. It's a place that's got wide open arms.
The Lord be with you, and also with you. Let's pray.
It tends to attract people and then kind of hold them in. ECY became the place where I could combine thoughts and ideas with what mattered in the language of the heart and the spirit.
All sorts of people come to worship at ECY. It's mainly students, but we see all sorts of people.
We believe in coming together week after week to hear our sacred stories, and we're comfortable experimenting a little bit, and we encourage people to try new things.
I quickly was asked to acolyte, do one of the readings during the service.
I got to preach a lot. I got to teach and lead Bible study. I got to test muscles of pastoral care, being with students through the griefs and challenges and joys of life.
Everything anyone ever sees about ECY, from our social media pages to our service projects to the liturgy itself, has been approved by, if not organized and facilitated by, some undergraduate student or group of undergraduate students. It gives us exactly what we need because we're the ones kind of making those decisions.
I don't think there's a member of ECY who just attends church. Once you attend church, you start going on the apple picking trips, or you join the co-chairs, or you get coffee with the seminarians.
In a big university, you can feel lost and anonymous. And at ECY, people knew me.
I think engaging in terms of social justice and involvement with local communities, local schools and churches, local social movements. I think ECY is really a forefront leader of those kinds of efforts.
One thing that we do at ECY is the Undoing Racism Working Group. It is a collective of members of the ECY community that get together and talk about different forms of racial injustice and ways to kind of mitigate it and eradicate it as we see it show up in the church and in our daily lives. How do we talk about the sins of racism so that we can go forward with justice and then reach the peace part? That's the real crux, how to be more Christ-like.
Love has equal components of justice and mercy as it does niceness.
We ourselves within our communities can be agents for change and activists for change.
We at Yale do have a responsibility to the privileges we've received to really try and set an ideal of what student-led ministry can be.
Right now is it's in a period of growth.
In a time in the church's life when engagement with young adults is a real challenge, is a real question, ECY is a vital expression of a thriving young adult ministry.
We have undergraduates sitting on the budget committee. We have undergraduates on the board of governors. We have undergraduates making really big decisions.
We're incredibly blessed to have been able to meet the Episcopal Church at Yale when I did.
The chance to say, yes, this is an important part of my identity can feel very empowering.
It's very rare on a campus like Yale's, where so much of the academic lifestyle is about, competition. And the beauty of ECY is that it's really about, that momentary reprieve from the hustle and bustle that's going on everywhere else.
Probably the most lasting impact ECY had on me is that I met my husband, Dan, there when we were both in graduate school. And it was a place where we could go to church together.
Welcome. Absolutely everyone, no matter what, even if you are questioning things, even if you don't believe in God, welcome. We're so happy to see you.
And now let me introduce Brandon and Milia, and please give them a huge St. Luke's welcome.
Milia, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Maylia, and I'm a sophomore undergraduate at Yale College. I've actually been to St. Luke's before. My boyfriend is from Darien, and one of the first places he took me when he was taking me around his hometown was the preschool right next to St. Luke's. And so that was a really special moment. So it's nice to be here with all of you. I'm a history and education studies major. I've been part of ECY pretty much since like February of last year. And I'm also part of the anti-racism working group, which Brandon started.
Thank you, Milia. Just a correction, I didn't start it. I believe Paul started it. I'm just, I took up the mantle. Just to give credit where credit's due. But I'm Brandon Chambers. Believe I would have seen most of you this morning. I am a senior in the college at Yale, originally from Kingston, Jamaica. I've been in the US for about 4 years now. My upbringing, I attended the Anglican church, as it's known in Jamaica, and my home parish in Kingston is also called St. Luke's. So I think we share in that idiosyncrasy. What else? I have been involved in ECY. I think this is actually my second year. I got really involved very late. So yeah, I'm one of the late bloomers. But yeah.
I would just add one thing, if I could, about Melia, because she's so humble. She doesn't say much about her own accomplishments, but Melia just independently wrote a grant to the Episcopal Evangelism Society, which was funded and which is actually reaching out to college students across high-stress colleges like Yale to help them with a journaling project, which will really deepen their own spiritual lives. So congratulations on that. And Melia and I have just submitted another grant application for a mentoring program. So talk about discovering and using one's gifts. That's one of the things we try to do. I'm wondering if each of you might want to share just a little bit about your spiritual journeys, and in a brief way. And we're going to have a lot of time at the end, folks, for questions.
Right, I can go first. I'm a cradle Episcopalian. My dad is an Episcopal priest, and his grandfather was also an Episcopal priest. And so I grew up going to church every Sunday, and I was part of the Sunday school. And then I went throughout the youth group program. And when I came to college, I went to ECY, maybe a few services. And then I kind of just stopped going. It was nice just not going to church every week, and seeing what that felt like. And then come the second semester of my freshman year, I realized something was missing, and that was church. So I ended up going to ECY starting during the pandemic. And I'm also part of Christ Church on Broadway in New Haven. I teach Sunday school there every week to a group of children. So that's where I get like the more intergenerational aspect of church. And then at ECY, I get the more college community feel of church. But I really, I feel church when I'm singing with people and I'm looking at my friends. And so that's why church itself is so important to me.
Yeah, I'm very similar. I was born and raised Anglican, as it's known in Jamaica. Both my parents' sides grew up in the church. They both came from very rural districts in Jamaica, and by virtue of their parents' influence, I guess they were pretty big in their own respective local churches. So it's a big part of my life for my whole life. When I got to campus at Yale, I think, as Malia said, that was the first moment of freedom that I ever had. So I sort of involuntarily took a break for a couple years. I would go to I try out a couple different parishes in New Haven for most of their feast days, so like Easter. And then at the end of my sophomore year, I don't know why, but I just started going to ECY, and I don't think I might have missed one Sunday, but I don't think I've missed a Sunday service at ECY since sophomore year, which I'm proud to say. Yeah, but that's my journey so far.
I wonder, Brandon, thank you for that. I wonder if you just might say a few words about the transformation of ECY just in the last year. And Malia, you've been very involved with this as well, to going from being a student-led ministry sort of in name to actually restructuring the whole ministry so that it would be student and young adult led. I just think that would be interesting to folks as a kind of a vehicle for change in the church, which we're all interested in the direction of young adult participation and leadership. So if you two could share a little bit about that, I think it'd be very exciting.
Yeah, I could start off and then Malia take over. But I think at the start of last year, so start of 2020, the leaders at the time had this big push to get the ministry student led. So we adopted that as a goal. I would say I think it was a very abstract goal. We said we wanted to be student led. We didn't know exactly what that meant. Lo and behold, COVID-19 comes around and kicks us all off campus. So we're separated from our usual worship space, and also have to create a whole new way of worshiping and a whole new way of keeping the ministry alive without the regular in-person services, as I'm sure most parishes have had to do. Yeah, so I think what we did over the summer was to just think very intentionally about how can we set up structures that, you know, can really put this idea of being a student-led ministry into action. One of them being we really expanded the number of student leaders that we had at ECY from about 3 to currently we have 10 student leaders. Melia is one, I'm one. And in addition to our seminarians, we're mostly undergrads. We also have one grad student and one young adult member. And we really play, I would say, a very huge part in planning worship, but also like other forms of fellowship. I mean, last Friday we had a game night, which was completely student planned. Anti-racism was shifted into student leadership, which is, it's been blossoming since. So I think, you know, I would say for me, the idea of student-led is really just how can we put structures in place that support students to grow as leaders? Because I think that's what really gets people interested and gets people hooked on, you know, campus ministry.
I agree. You know, Paul is just so great at asking people to do things, and it's really hard to say no to him. And so I think I showed up one Sunday on Zoom, like inconspicuously without my camera on. And he asked me to help him out with one thing. And then all of a sudden I was taking on all these different leadership roles. And it was so fun and it was so empowering. And it was a great way to be welcomed into the community. And all of a sudden I had the courage to like put on my camera and to be active in the chat of Zoom. And now I have all these friends. And what's so exciting is that there are these leaders on campus from all different walks of campus that I just don't come into contact with, honestly. Like we have pre-med majors and electrical engineering and, you know, history majors like me and people that I don't meet in my clubs normally. And so it's nice to have all of us come together and to say prayers together. I hardly ever, I've never said a prayer with like more than 3 people that were my age in the same room, and like singing all the same hymns that we love. And so I think just giving people those leadership positions, the community just like kind of falls right after that leadership.
Thanks, Melia. I would just add a word if I could, because it's been such an amazing and satisfying journey for me. What we've tried to do, first of all, what Brandon said about we worked all summer to put together a new structure for ECY. No one ever expects their students to work in the summer. It's the one time they have off. They're doing internships. They're doing all kinds of stuff. They just voluntarily worked all across the summer on top of the pandemic to restructure the ministry. And this Congregational Council of 10, they have now divided up the ministry into 10 sort of slices, you know, worship, evangelism, you know, communications, 10 parts. And they basically each run that part. And then the chaplains and the seminarians are resources or servants of theirs to implement what they have decided. And it has been so much fun. And I say this to those of you who have been either on the vestry or priests, to be able to say to people, what would it look like to have a completely student-run, or in your case, a lay-run church? And what that would mean is that our students now are integrally involved in forming the overall budget. They're extremely well represented on the Board of Governors. I'm hiring interns and program staff for next year. The students are doing the hiring decisions. You know, so you basically take a lens and you say, what are all the critical operations? And why do those always have to be a priest making those? The other thing that just knocked my socks off, folks, was I knew that people craved leadership and that was a key to their involvement. What I didn't realize is that once folks began to actually run programs and run operations at ECY, they actually got very motivated to ask the question, why isn't the church doing this across the whole church? Where are the young adults in church? And so they became very active politically with the diocese and went to convention and insisted that convention appoint a young adult task force which would figure out why we don't have young adults in the church anymore, and then do something about it, not only at the parish level, but they're thinking of making changes at the next convention that are like, you can't form a diocesan committee without 25% young people on it. Or, you can't write a diocesan budget without X number of resources for people between the ages of 17 and 35. These are smart people who understand political action, and they are tired of a church that isn't really paying attention to the challenge we face right now, which is the lack of young adults in our community and the impoverishment we experience as older folk, not having those dynamic young voices. So that really surprised me. I thought the last thing they would want would be to sit in dry diocesan meetings and talk about policy, but they really want to change things. So we have a young adult task force of over 30 members, almost all of whom are under 35, clergy, lay, and so forth, young adults, and they are doing a phenomenal job. So that's what leadership does. And I know that you're taking some steps in St. Luke's to do that as well. And whatever you can do in that direction is just so helpful. Ryan, how are we doing on time?
We have until noon.
Okay, so
it might be a good time to see if there are questions.
That's fantastic. Yeah, please jump in and mine the wisdom of these young people. Don't be shy like St. Luke's normally is. You want to use the raise hand function?
Okay.
Okay, there goes Fran.
So Malia, what do you want to do with your life after Yale?
I'd like to become a lawyer.
Oh, okay. And anything in particular, kind of law?
I don't know yet. I'm working for a public defense office in New York City. So maybe something up that alley, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Tell them what you're doing, Malia, in the public defense office. It's great.
I'm working with people who have, for medical reasons, are asking for clemency from the governor's office. So case by case, getting people out of prison for COVID.
Oh, very interesting. And what about you, Brandon? What are your goals after Yale?
Yeah, that's a much more impending question for me than it is for Malia. But I think so. I'm working for a couple of years, and then my plan is to go back to grad school and hopefully enter academia, be a professor. That's my
okay. Do you want to stay? Do you want to stay in the United States or go back home?
I think my dream is to go home long term, but I think I want to, stay at least in North America for a bit to get some, qualifications and then go back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your sermon was beautiful this morning, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Al.
Yeah, how you doing, Paul? First of all, good to see you again. I'm interested to know a little bit about the evangelism on campus. What has the Episcopal Church at Yale and these students done to bring the word to the larger campus community?
That's funny. I'm in charge of evangelism for our congregational council. So you asked the right people. We have that evangelism grant. So that is more insular with students that are already part of Episcopal communities on their campuses throughout the Northeast. And so that's a time to share about our own spiritual journeys, to name where God is in our lives, and to give thanks together. And then in terms of the actual Yale campus and New Haven community, we also have a social media chair that's part of our congregational council named Michaela. And so we're working on writing testimonials, and when people are coming back to campus, to have signs, places, talking about where people see God in their lives and, just what moves them and what they're missing from the secular campus. In order to, it's something that people are trying to find ways, especially through like meditation and yoga and mindfulness, types of things, a lot of people are trying to look for ways to do it, but a lot of people don't try the church. So trying to tap into people that know that they're missing something, and showing them that the church can fill that need.
You know, I would just add one thing, unless Brandon wants to jump in. Brandon? I would just add one thing that the students are doing that I'm so impressed by. We have probably about 35 or 40 students who are in the closest circle in ECY, and this is like any other parish. And then we have probably another 50 or 60 who are sort of peripherally connected. And one of the things that's been hard is that those people who are peripherally connected, we used to have a lot of different on-ramps, like apple picking and game night and, you know, ice cream socials, all kind of stuff that they didn't have to make the big leap to come to church, but they could experience the intense love of community, and then they would want to come, you know. But we've lost all of those with the pandemic. So one of the things the Congregational Council has done, which is so cool, is that each of the 10 members has a list of 10 people in the congregation, many of whom are on those margins. And they are shepherds to those people. So they keep them engaged and they keep communicating with them. And that, at least until that either leads them to come into the inner circle, or it keeps touch with them until we're back on campus. And our secret of church growth has been the same as any parish in the Episcopal Church, which is that students bring friends. They are so moved by what happens for them. They overcome the embarrassment of talking about religion or church, and they actually say, hey, why don't you hang with me on Sunday? And a big part of it is, I think Malia and Brandon would both attest, is that we have a fabulous dinner after every service and people can socialize. Some people come only for dinner. That's cool. When Malia announced to me in the middle of freshman year that she was not going to come to church because she finally had her freedom, my response was, you go, girl, you go. And then months later, she decided to come back. But just honoring and respecting the journey of people wherever they are on campus. But thank you, Malia. That was a beautiful summary.
Well, that's what that shepherding program is also for, is like discernment as lay people of, you know, even when we graduate, what type of Episcopalian do we want to be? And why is that? And are we the type of people that really want to go on the vestry right away and make moves? Or, you know, are we just want to go a few times, or just be meeting with our priest like regularly? So having those conversations with people and being able to check in with them like at least every month, and have calls and texts and coffee and things like that, just to keep people engaged, even if they're not coming every Sunday.
And I can't overestimate how challenging it is as a chaplain, what a good job we do, what a good job God does in transformation during those 4 years of college. And then what an incredible challenge it is when people leave campus, finding a church that will really welcome young people with all their gifts, really welcome them into leadership, welcome them into suggesting changes in what a church does. Welcome them into suggesting ways a church could actually attract young people instead of they should come, you know, and by the way, they should pledge a little bit too, because these are young adults who have an experience of faith that prepares them for the leadership of how church has to change. And we need parishes that will welcome them as all of who they are, even though it's a little scary to welcome people who are going to be asking for us to change. So thank you, Malia. That was beautiful. Other questions? I don't see any hands. Oh, okay. Gloria Hayes.
Yes, I was wondering, and Paul, since you know St. Luke's, what are things that we can do at St. Luke's to bring in youth of this age? It's easier at Yale, where you've got, you know, a whole pool of people in that age group. But in Darien, you know, St. Luke's is, you know, old people like us and married couples and people with kids. How do you bring in these young adults in a welcoming way that makes them want to come and then want to be contributing members of the parish? It's really tricky.
Yeah. Oh, Malia and Brandon, do you want to start that off? And I'm, you know me, I'm like, you know, William Faulkner. I'll always add a lot of words. So you guys go first.
I get started off. just because my boyfriend and his siblings went through the confirmation process, and they still talk about this one field trip they went with their confirmation classes to St. John the Divine in New York City. And I mean, I don't know how many young adults, like I think the age group is 21 to 35. I don't know how many young adults there are in Darien, but there are a lot of young adults that come home over the holidays for Thanksgiving, or they'll take the train up from New York City for Easter or things like that. So I think having some sort of get together with young people during those times when people would be most likely to be visiting their hometown, I think it's something that people would be interested in doing, especially because if it's already set up, then you don't need to like text all your friends. You could just like kind of show up and see who you meet. That would be my advice.
It's such a cool suggestion, Melia, because I think of all the amazing relationships that your teenagers, Gloria, have had with other choristers, with trips they've taken, with confirmation class, with youth group. These are real relationships. And imagine if you were a convener of those relationships 3, 4, 5, 6 times a year. That would be one strategy. Brandon, do you have some thoughts?
No, not very concrete thoughts. I mean, just one thing that I think it's a problem. It's an issue everywhere. I mean, even back home in Jamaica, remember my mom telling me one of our friends at church, whose daughter was very involved in like leading Sunday school and everything around my age, told her mom, yeah, I just want to take a break from church. And her mom was up in arms and like distraught and everything. And I mean, my impression is that if you have a young person that is even marginally involved in spirituality these days, you're doing a very good job, you know. So I think church needs to be as easy to access as it can be. I don't think young people can or need to come like week on week on week. I think if you can have these, as Melia said, these easy on-ramps, as Paul calls them, to just get people involved maybe once or twice a month or even less frequently, so that they can even feel involved on their own terms or on our own terms. I think that's a great, change of conception.
Yeah, and I would just add a word that this is a slow growth process, but absolutely vital. It's going deep rather than going wide, and it's vital to the future of the church. So I love what Brandon said about and Melia said about the number of young adults that you actually have access to. I mean, what if you freed up some of Derek's time? See, I'm going to get in trouble with Ryan now. I'm so sorry. But what if you freed up some of Derek's time, and his job was to convene small groups of young adults in the community, not to ask them to come to church, but to ask them about their lives and ask them about their most pressing concerns and ask them where they find meaning, not God, but meaning in their life, and operate on those terms. What would happen is you would get some, my experience with young adults is they are longing for community. They're longing for meaning that transcends their own, right now, very challenging life experience. And you all know what I'm talking about. And the way they find that solace and, dare I say, hope is with other young adults. The way they find the strength to endure through very challenging times is with young adults, not with parents who say, oh, it's going to be all right. It's going to be okay. They don't feel like it's going to be okay now. They feel like their entire world has existentially changed. And the only people who understand that are other young adults. So forget about getting them to church. That's a secondary goal. Just get them, feed them where they are. And they will experience the love of a community that they do not have now. It doesn't happen in the bars of New York or even the bars of Darien. They will experience a loving community. They will actually, as our ECY folks say, we actually experience the only place at Yale where we can be a failure and be applauded for. That's what our students say, the only place at Yale. And that your kids have the same problem. So can we find and create places, and Derek should not wear his collar when he does it. Can he just be another young adult in a community where there is no nexus and no crucible in which young adults can be formed? Because they're all expected to go to New York, and Al knows what I'm saying. So, make an investment and then let them determine where their entry point might be. They might just want to go on with a special gathering, sort of quasi worship, quasi fellowship, whatever, with young adults. Maybe that's all they want from you. But if you give them that, they're going to be part of the church of the future. Otherwise,
the trouble is COVID's made it so difficult.
Well, I understand that, and they know that. Yeah, but they're still just as hungry, Gloria. That's my point. And it's and COVID will end. But if you're out there with them, struggling with them through COVID, they will remember that. So just a practical idea. It's got to be of, by, and for it to have any traction at all. Of, by, and for young adults. I think we can take one last question. Let's see. Let me look at my other screen. Anybody on the other screen? Come on, let's have a zinger or a real sweetie. One or the other, or both. Come on. Oh, here goes Mary. Oh, hi, Mary. Mary's like one of the greatest ministers with children that there is. She's just
very
like,
sweet.
Oh, it's very true. Go ahead, Mary. You know everything I'm talking about as a young adult who grew up and stayed in the church.
I guess I was just I'm thinking about what you all are saying, and I was wondering if a way to start would be looking at, like, we've done all these mission trips, and say, look at the specific mission trip they're all in college now. Maybe have a reunion pizza party. I don't know, obviously when COVID's over, but I just wonder if that might be a way to just sort of start and then build on it that way. Like, at least these people were pretty excited about ministry when they were younger, so maybe they still would, and maybe under the guise of they get to see these friends that they had shared a week with that was meaningful to them.
What they were really excited about, Mary, was deepening relationships in the context of something beyond myself. So it wasn't ministry so much as a very relational, transformational experience. And there's lots of creative ways, and this is one of the most creative groups in the country in terms of what you've got in talent at St. Luke's. There's lots of creative ways to have Zoom parties. I don't mean boring things where everybody's uncomfortable and socially awkward. That's what old people do. Young people actually can figure out how to, like, have some film clips from that ministry experience, have some sharing, have some celebration, have some breakout rooms where they can talk about who were you then and who am I now? And is there any relationship between those two? If we put our creativity to it, and usually those experiences can be designed by young people. But I think if you develop a core of young people, young adults outside of St. Luke's, they can guide those efforts. And it'll be a lot easier than older people trying to imagine what would appeal to younger people. You see what I mean? A lovely, beautiful idea. Look at any experience where their lives and hearts were changed and help them reconnect with that, because that's faith. For them, that was faith. It usually involves relationship, often social action or social justice. This is where the hearts of young adults are. And that's, I think, the hope for our country, really.
And I think those relationships, if they had been lost or anything, a grounding point would be just the shared experience of growing up and going to high school in Darien, Connecticut, because every hometown is a very particular type of life, and I went to a very particular type of high school, and then I came to college, and I don't know anyone that had that type of experience. So it's hard to build connections with people because we didn't have that foundation. So I think starting those conversations from what do we have in common? What was this like rigorous high school experience like? What were the pressures that we experienced, and then building off of that, as Paul was saying.
Yeah, that really leads into what are our lives like now? And what are we struggling with now? But there has to be a commonality of experience of foundation for these kind of efforts. It can't be you are young adults, so go talk about being here. It's what has really changed your life, with whom. Let's gather those whom's and do something with them. And you know the way our students describe it? They describe it as creating a new church. You know, it doesn't have pews and it doesn't necessarily have, you know, a great priest like Ryan at the front, you know, but it is really church for what people are needing right now. I think we've run out of time, Ryan.
I was just going to thank you, Paul and Brandon and Malia, for your wisdom and your hope for that future church. And I think this has been really a wonderful conversation. And I know I speak for everyone when I thank you for that, and thank you for the work that you are doing to have such a vibrant campus ministry just up the road. And we hope you'll come visit again soon, all three of you. Okay.
I will, and I'm going to put I'm going to put my email in the chat box. So if any of you want to follow along with what we're doing, and we promise not to stalk you in any way, but please do write to me, and you can get our newsletter. You can even get our weekly e-blasts, and I think it'll give you some hope and some inspiration. So please just jot that email down and feel free to be in touch at any time. And I just want to, Brian, can I just thank all the people who asked questions? I thought they were terrific questions. And I think they gave our folks something to really talk about. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Malia.
Love you. Thank you all so much.
Happy Valentine's
Day.
Thanks, Ryan. Bye.